Thank you so much, Shane. Well, hello, everyone. It's nice. It's really good. Good work. I reckon Jess and I, on the whole, I'm going to say the bold claim that we're pretty good parents, all right? But I'm going to own up to some things this morning, okay? One thing in which we have deeply, deeply failed at is the area of technology. Like Max and Josh, they are iPad babies. And the people in our midst who have looked after them, they know that to be true, don't they, Robin? Absolutely. Now, I won't tell you which one, but we have, in the past, had some really, really significant issues with this. And one of my boys would pretend to go to sleep at night, wait until we stop making noise, then sneak out of their bedroom to go and get their iPad, take it back to their room, hide under the blankets, and play it all night. And so I would wake up the next morning to find this absolutely passed out kid with an iPad flat on their face. And it was always interesting to me because it's like, what did he expect to happen? Did he expect to get away with this? Even if he was clever enough to get the iPad back out onto charge or something, he's not going to survive the next day. I'm going to know something is wrong. And so I would have this conversation with my little boy afterwards, and I'd ask him, why did you do something wrong? Especially when you know you're going to get caught. I'm going to find out about it. And his answer was really interesting. He said that he knew what was expected of him, he knows the rules, but he couldn't stop himself from doing it. It's like he was drawn to doing the wrong thing. Now, I reckon that this is the ultimate human problem. Think about the first story in the Bible after God creates the world. You know, the first story that is actually about humans. We've got Adam and Eve, and they're given this whole garden, all the blessing in the world that they could possibly want. They could thrive in all the freedom that they have. They just have one boundary, don't they? And it's like they can't help it. What do? They have this fundamental problem, and they eat from that one tree that they're not meant to eat from. Why is this the first story in the Bible? I reckon it's because it's our fundamental problem as humans, is that we know how we ought to live, and yet we can't seem to live that way. The first passage we're going to look at this morning is the final part of Moses' very last sermon that he preaches in the wilderness. They're just about to go into the promised land. He's about to hand over the torch of leadership to Joshua, and Moses is about to die. Moses has been the conduit for God's words to the Hebrews for 40 plus years at this point. He's received the law from God, God's instruction for how to live, and he's laid it out plainly for everybody to be able to understand and follow. Even more than that, in the previous chapters, he's told them clearly that what the two ways forward are for their existence. He says, and this is my paraphrase here, he says, here are all the blessings that will come to you if you follow God's laws. You'll prosper in the land that God will give you. You'll have huge flocks. You'll prosper greatly. You'll have great families. Society's going to flourish. There'll even be, if you read chapter 15 of Deuteronomy, there'll even be no poor people amongst you because of the way in which you love and share and give. It's sort of like this utopia ideal thing. But if you don't, that's one way forward. The other way forward, the choice that's before you, Moses says, is that the other way is that the blessing will be taken from you if you don't follow these laws. You'll lose the land that God gives you, and God will disperse you as slaves among the nations. Now, what's the better choice? It's pretty obvious, isn't it? The best choice is absolutely to choose life, to choose the right thing. They're like, my little kid in bed trying to decide what's going to happen. Tomorrow's going to be so much better if he follows the rules, and yet they can't, This is how Moses begins his final sermon, the final part of his last sermon before they go off under Joshua's leadership. He says this, when all these blessings and curses I have set before you come on you, and you take them to heart wherever the Lord your God disperses you among the nations. He's already laid out the two ways forward. One of them doesn't involve dispersing among the nations. The other one does. Moses already knows that the people will fail, that they will choose the opposite way, that they will unfortunately fail. And God is going to disperse them amongst the nations. Moses already knows that the exile will happen. All of God's talk about this stiff-necked people has rubbed off on Moses, and he knows it to be true because this is the big human problem. Adam and Eve took the apple, Abraham slept with Hagar, Lot's wife looked back, Jacob stole the birthright, Joseph reveled in his father's favor, and Moses himself, he wouldn't face Pharaoh without Aaron to speak for him. And these same people in front of him made a golden calf to worship God straight after God parted the sea to save them out of Egypt. In every one of these examples and plenty more, people knew how God had directed them to live, and yet they each chose to go their own way instead. Moses then speaks with this sober knowledge that the people in front of him, they haven't changed. They're no different than the others who have gone before. But he does prophesy about a future after the exile, in which God will provide a solution to the big human problem. Let's read again. This is still Deuteronomy 30, and I'm going to start from verse 1 again. I'm going to go to verse 6 this time. This is Moses speaking. When all these blessings and curses I have set before you come on you, and you take them to heart wherever God has dispersed you among the nations, and when you and your children return to the Lord your God and obey him with all your heart and with all your soul, according to everything I've commanded you today, then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you and gather you again from all the nations where he has scattered you. Even if you have been banished to the most distant land under the heavens, from there the Lord your God will gather you and bring you back. He will bring you to the land that belonged to your ancestors, and you will take possession of it. He will make you more prosperous and numerous than your ancestors. And this is the key part, the key verse in my mind. And then the Lord your God will circumcise your hearts and the hearts of your descendants, so that you may love him with all your heart and with all your soul and live. This is Moses' point. Humans know what to do, but he knows they won't do it. And there are consequences. The covenant promise of God is like a double-edged sword. There's great blessing that comes with being the people who represent him, but it's not a free ride, is it? If the people who represent God as evil, then God is honor bound to do something about it, lest the whole world thinks that God must therefore be evil. If he lets his representatives get away with evil, then God is revealed to the world as evil. God must show the world he is good by dealing with the evil that his representatives do. But at the same time, God is deeply loving to his people. This isn't just a heartless transaction. Verse 3 in the previous slide, it says that God is driven by compassion. All throughout the Bible, we hear that God is faithful to his promises even when his people don't hold up their end of the agreement. And so as sure as Moses is regarding the future exile of Israel, he is just as sure that at any point in the future when his people turn back to him, well then God's compassion on them is absolutely assured. God will regather his people and restore everything, their lands, their numbers, their prosperity. But even more than that, and this is so exciting, verse 6 says that God is going to address that underlying problem that's caused this whole mess from the very beginning, that's messed everything up since Eden. God is going to circumcise their hearts so that they can love God with all their hearts and live. So what does that mean? Well, remember that in biblical literature, the heart is not just the part of us that feels emotions. This was a sermon from 3 weeks ago, wasn't it? In the Bible, the heart is the seat of the entire self. The heart doesn't just control emotions, it also is where our thoughts and our actions are decided upon. It's where we hold our most fundamental commitments, our deepest hopes and beliefs. You know the famous line that Jesus says, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. Why is that? It's because what we treasure is defined by what our hearts are set on. The ultimate human problem about knowing how we ought to live but unable to live it, it's a heart problem fundamentally. If our treasure was God, if our hearts were set on God, then we'd live out how we ought to live. But try as we might, our hearts stray towards other treasures, don't they? Other idols and other desires. For humans to love God with all of their hearts, therefore there must be a fix. Like Deuteronomy 30 says, we need what's broken in our hearts to be repaired. Moses calls this fix circumcision of the heart. Now that sounds gross, I totally get that. But it isn't. Circumcision is this outward sign that a man and his family's status in the covenant of God was assured. But it was always just an outward symbol. It never had the power to fix this real human problem. We need an inward change, don't we? That's circumcision of the heart, or at least the way that Moses talks about it. But there are other people in the Bible who talk about this exact same thing. They use different words. There's Jeremiah in chapter 31, verses 31 to 33. He says this, "The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. It won't be like the covenant I made with their ancestors. This is the covenant I will make with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put the law in their minds and I'll write it on their hearts. I will be their God and they will be my people." Ezekiel, he gets this same problem too, and he sees the same future solution that Moses and Jeremiah saw. He uses different words again though. Ezekiel 36 verses 24, it says this, "For I will take you out of the nations. I will gather you from all the countries and bring you back to your own land. I'll sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I'll cleanse you from all your impurities and from all your idols, and I'll give you a new heart, and I'll put a new spirit in you. I'll remove from you your heart of stone, and I'll give you a heart of flesh. I'll put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws." Each of these prophets get it. They see the same problem. There's something broken at our core. Trying to do good doesn't work. Knowing the rules better doesn't work. Drastic religious rituals to show your commitment, they don't work. We need God to do something in us, something we can't do ourselves. We need a new heart. We need a newly orientated center of our life that's focused, laser focused on God. How good would that be? Think about it, How nice would it be as people who desire to be God's people? Wouldn't it be wonderful if the thing you most desired to do was the thing that you should do in every situation? Our culture pushes us the other way, doesn't it? That we're told, you do you, or do what makes you happy. Take care of number one. Why are those the messages we get? Well, because everyone has that Holy Spirit voice telling them the way that they ought to live. And I guess one solution would be to drown out that voice as best as you can, to say that that's not a rational solution. You don't need to feel that guilt. You've just got to get on with the way you want to do life anyway. What's the worst that could happen? But God's solution is the opposite. It's to amplify that voice, to give you the ability to respond to it, to give, to serve, to encourage, to lift up, to sacrifice, to praise, to find compromise, to love. So how do you know if you've got that new heart which God promises? Well, you'll notice that you'll start to have moments where you actually do desire to do good, even at a cost to you. It might be a big change all at once. I remember Xavier's testimony, about a year or so ago. Xavier, I can't remember when you came, but you stood up here and you said, God just came to me and it changed my life completely. Not completely, Xavier isn't Jesus now, but he had this radical life transformation that happened almost in an instant. And yet my story is very different. It's been slow, and I still have these problems and I still struggle and everything like that, but I've seen slow progression. I don't have the perfect answer for this, sorry, let me go back a second. But it's still growth, isn't it? And so does that mean that we should beat ourselves up and try harder and to feel more guilt to motivate ourselves to be better the other 90% of the time that we still struggle? My advice would be, don't do that. It won't work. It's the old way of doing things. I've tried it, to beat yourself up over the things that you do wrong. It's not going to work. You'll never change your heart by fixing the behavior. Behavior is always an outworking of the heart. It's God that gives us that new heart. We fix our attention on Him and He changes us from the inside out. This is a natural question though, isn't it? Like, why, if we have new hearts, do we still struggle to do the right thing? And I'm not sure I really have a perfect answer for this. Like, the best I can do is to say that we live in a weird time in the history of the world where the kingdom of God has arrived in the person of Jesus. Like, anyone who follows Jesus has the Spirit. They're born of the Spirit. They have a new heart for sure. But as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, like, we're still yet to cast off the corruptible for the incorruptible. Or in other words, God is still yet to bring about the full and complete reality of His eternal kingdom of God and to transform us into full citizens of that kingdom, who can live it all out. Jesus will return one day. Heaven and earth will be made one, and then our new hearts will indeed be on display for all to see. Have you ever wondered, maybe you might screw up heaven by sinning when you're there? Like, I used to think about that all the time. That's not something we need to worry about, because at that time, what you ought to do will be the thing that you most desire to do. Your treasure, the treasure of your heart, will be in the right place. You will be drawn to do the right thing every time. You'll have a new heart in the most full and complete sense. Until that time, though, we kind of live in this tension of here and not yet. God gives us our new hearts for sure, and we are empowered to live as we ought to, but it's not full or complete. And even the Apostle Paul, he sympathizes with us in this time. In Romans 7, when he says, although I want to do good, evil is right with me. For in my inner being I delight in God's law. That's Paul's new heart. He delights in God's law. But I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within me. The evidence of a new heart isn't that you always do the right thing. It's that if that were the case, then no one has a new heart. The evidence is a growing desire to follow the ways of Jesus. I can see a new heart in Emma when she shares with the lounge group that she's going to get baptized. I can see a new heart in Stephen as he does the hard thing and shares the gospel on the streets of Launton. I can see a new heart in Paul and Tristan and John and Linda and Corey and the others that have gone away, or they've used their holidays to serve at Boys Brigade Leadership Camp, and they're still paying their way, just like all the campers do, to wash up dishes and to clean up messes. I see a new heart in Maxie as she gives her time to visit those who are having a rough time and going through big things in their life, even though she's going through big things in her life. Are these people perfect? No way. I mean, Maxie's pretty close, let's be honest. But even she's still got growth going on. God is still working in us and growing us. So what are we to do? Maybe you're feeling like you want a new heart for the first time. You've never actually asked Jesus into your life. You've never actually been born again, all that sort of stuff. Well, today's the day that you can ask that. Maybe you just want to ask that God will keep growing you to move more deeply with a desire to walk in the ways of Jesus, to keep on growing that heart within you. How are we going to do that? Well, perhaps a little illustration. Now, I often tell people that I was never taught the instruments that I play, and that is 99% true. When I was about 13 years old, I had like 5 drum lessons, and I absolutely hated it, all right? Because my teacher was constantly telling me everything that I was doing that was wrong, and I just felt like this is crushing, this is soul-destroying, I hate it, and so I gave up. And like I properly gave up the drums for a very long time. That was the first instrument I learned. But then I heard Carter Beauford, okay? Carter Beauford is the drummer for the Dave Matthews Band, okay? It's a weird band. It's like drums, bass, acoustic guitar, sax, and fiddle, but it's worth it. It works. It does, I promise. And if there's one reason it works, it's because Carter Beauford is the most amazing drummer in the history of the world, okay? You can fight me on that. And so I heard his beats and his fills, and they were just wild. And for the first time, my heart was actually set on being a drummer. Now, I still wasn't good. Nothing changed in my ability to play the drums at that point. I still played wrong, absolutely. But now my focus wasn't on not playing wrong. My focus was be like Carter. And it changed everything. Instead of always being down on myself for the things I got wrong, I started to actually feel a bit of pride when I got something right. Making mistakes was just part of the process now. It wasn't the definition of who I was as a drummer. My eyes were lifted off my own suckiness and locked onto drumming precision. Here's my point. If you want a new heart, or if you want to continue to grow your heart, stop focusing on your own suckiness and look at Jesus. You'll never become more like Jesus by trying to not do the things he didn't do. Make Jesus the treasure of your heart, and you will change. Your new heart will be moved by the needs of others, because that's what happened to Jesus. When Jesus saw the needs in others, he responded to them. If he is our treasure, if we hold him in the highest esteem, if our eyes are locked on him, then it's going to prompt our heart to do the same thing, to self-sacrifice, to embrace it. Your new heart will be drawn to crazy things like praying and worshiping and meditating on Scripture. When we indulge that urge, you may well find that you grow to like it and appreciate it and love it. This is your new heart growing. We're going to move into a time of communion now, and Arian's going to come back up. He's going to sing a little item.